Why does a psychiatrist write a book about the heart, how to lose weight, and how to save the planet? Well, let's ask Dr. Charles Byrne, who is a psychiatrist living in Mullingar. Good morning.
Good morning, Will.
Now, this goes back some years ago, and tell us about that game of tennis that didn't go so well.
Yeah, well, when I left my full-time job with HSE as a psychiatrist, I started working part-time, but what happened was, unfortunately, I got into a bad habit of staying up late at night, watching movies and snacking, and not snacking on healthy foods, biscuits and crackers and everything. And I'd gained weight and my cholesterol had gone up. And one day a colleague asked me to have a game of tennis. I hadn't played for a little while. So when we went out on the court, she was much better than I was, and she had me running around. But very quickly I found that I couldn't catch my breath. I was struggling to breathe. Even on the shortest run, I couldn't. And I was very worried. It was a frightening feeling that just a little run and you couldn't breathe. So we abandoned the game, and she said, you need to see a doctor and get help. So to cut a long story short, I spent the next 3 days in emergency departments having a whole battery of tests, and everything went okay until I went on what's called the stress ECG test, where they put you on a treadmill and they have you relieved.
Yes.
And as the speed started increasing and incline started increasing, I had to ask the lady to stop again. I couldn't breathe. And the doctor told me that what had happened, there was an abnormality on my ECG called QT depression, which suggests the heart is not getting enough blood coming through to it. So I went on and had an angiogram, and after the angiogram, the consultant showed me that you see a video of your heart, and I could see my heart and the coronary arteries which run around the heart, which supply the heart with blood. And it really struck me how fragile your heart is. You could see it's there beating away all the time. We're totally unaware of it. And, it really needs to be looked after and protected. But the doctor said to me, the good news is there's no blockages in the major arteries of your heart, the coronary arteries. But he said, I think that your smaller arteries are blocked or partially blocked in the heart, and you need to address that. He said it's cardiac ischemia, which means not enough blood and nutrients and oxygen are getting to the heart, especially when it's under pressure or exercise. So he said, you need to lose the weight. I'd gained about a stone, lose the weight, get your cholesterol down, go on a statin, and have follow-up with your GP. So that was fine. I decided to do all that. But the next morning, a few mornings after starting the statin, actually, I woke up with a terrible pain in my leg. I thought it was cramp and it would go. It was all down.
You were
my
hoping
leg.
it was a cramp.
Yeah, but it wasn't. It wouldn't go away, and I was limping around. And again, to cut a long story short, I went back to my. I was afraid it was a clot in the leg, but I went back to my GP, and she said, no, it's a side effect of the statins. So again, to cut a long story short, I thought, I'd like to see if there's a way I can do this with diet and exercise and without trying without the statins. So she was a bit reluctant and said, we'll have to monitor you, but she was agreeable. So I decided I was going to look. As a doctor, I had access to all the medical databases, all the medical research literature and everything.
Yeah.
So,
if I may interject,
Sure.
This is an important difference between, let's say, if it happened to me, my first port of call might be Dr. Google.
Yeah, yes.
And some of us will follow different influencers online,
Yeah.
some who have qualifications, many who don't, and very little way to distinguish. You at least had the skills to search through published literature and validate it.
I was fortunate, and there is, as you say, an enormous amount of misinformation around. So I wanted to make my search very scientifically based. The other part of the problem was I read one does, as you say, hear a lot of things. Like I'd heard about the Mediterranean diet, and there are guidelines of the various medical organisations like the American Heart Association. But I did find them a bit vague. I wanted something very precise that I could follow. For instance, the Mediterranean diet says, well, eat seafood and have salads with olive oil and various things like that. But it did seem a bit imprecise, and the same with the American Heart Association. It says things like eat healthy oils, but it wasn't very good at describing exactly what those healthy oils were. There's certainly fats we need to avoid called saturated fats, and they're found, for instance, in red meat and dairy products. But I want to try and find something more exact. And the other thing that influenced me was previously in my life I'd been vegetarian for 14 years. So my first port of call was to see, could vegetarian diets lessen your chance of getting heart disease? So that was my first search through the medical literature. And I used medical databases like PubMed and the Cochrane Library. And I was, thanks to my HSE connection, I was still able to get the full line articles, the full text articles. So, again, just to be brief, that part of my search told me that just by being vegetarian, you can reduce your chances of getting a heart attack or cardiovascular disease by 25%. So that was a good start, but I wanted to find out more. I wanted to know, was there a way you could even reduce your chances much more than that? And I'd heard that President Bill Clinton had serious heart disease. He was renowned for loving fast food. He used to eat lots of burgers and fries, and he ran into trouble because he had serious heart disease, and he had to have a coronary bypass where they replaced part of the coronary artery with a vein. That didn't work. It clogged up, and he had to have stents. So but I'd heard that with the help of a doctor with a very unusual, revolutionary approach, he'd overcome his heart problems almost completely. So I Googled, I did use Google, President Bill Clinton's doctor, and that took me to two doctors, Dr. Dean Ornish and Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, American doctors who pioneered plant-based diets for the treatment of heart disease. But not only plant-based, also very low in oils and fats. So I got Dr. Ornish's book. I started with him, and I was most impressed by his work. And he, in his work, did a study where patients who went on his diet, which was actually virtually a vegan diet plus a low fat content, patients who went on it, 82% of them after 1 year were able to actually reverse their heart disease to a degree. What that means is the coronary arteries, they're like hot water pipes. You know, they get furred up with calcium or lime, and the diameter decreases. The same happens in our bodies, excuse me, with heart disease.
And they can stiffen then as a result as well.
It's called atherosclerosis, and the lumen or the diameters of the arteries get smaller.
But Charles, can it just pause for a moment?
I'm sorry, I'm rabbiting on.
No, you're fine. We have to take a break for the news.
Sure.
But I think something we should come back to is, okay, looking through the lens of heart disease alone, you might favour this option. But many will have doubts, let's say, where do you get your proteins if it's a vegetarian diet? And then there's the whole matter of sugar to talk about as well, and some of the other influences on modern eating. That's all coming up after the news at 10.
Send us a text 083 3010 103. Powered by Lamb Brothers Tullamore.